So a recent report on fair pay was released by the Caribbean Policy Research Institute. We know them as CAPRI. So we invited Dr. Diana Thorburn, Director of Research at CAPRI, and economist Keenan Faulkner to discuss achieving pay equity and easier access to salary scales. They're with us now. Good morning to you both. Welcome to Smile Jamaica.
Good morning. Thanks for having us.
So I think Dr. Diane vexed me because I did the interview already. We were having such a long chat outside. But I want to start with something that I said outside, because days gone by I could understand why a female football player didn't earn as much as a male football player. Mm-hmm. And I say that because at that time, if you go to a man match, it's 10,000 people. If you go to a woman match, it's 1,000. I could understand that. What I can't understand, and still I couldn't and still can't understand, is I'm the chief executive officer here, and I get $10,000 a year. They hire you, and you get $5,000 just because you're female. Is that right?
That's what the data shows, yes, that there is what we call an unexplained wage gap. So people of similar qualifications, experience, and there's nothing else that can explain except that it's a man and a woman, and there's a difference there. So that's the unexplained wage gap between men and women, what we call the gender wage gap.
Wow, and that happens right across the board.
It happens across the board. It happens across the entire world. I mean, it's worse in some countries than in others. Of course, countries like Finland have the smallest. It would surprise you that some of the more advanced countries also have large wage gaps. Some of the OECD countries in Asia have some of the largest gender wage gaps. Jamaica has it. It is smaller at the top, meaning that the more qualified you are, the higher up you are. It's a smaller gap, but it's still there, and it's larger among less qualified people.
Keenan, wow. It's something that anecdotally we've been saying all this time. Why do you think there's still, I don't want to use the word resistance, I'll say we're slow to change. Why does it still exist, this gap?
I would say mostly it's down to traditional attitudes and patterns. So CAPRI's report would have revealed that there are about 15 or so reasons why women think believe that they are being paid less. Mm-hmm. And among the top 5, you would have found reasons such as, male-dominated corporate culture, the belief that women cannot do the same job as a man, and it reflects in the distribution pattern of jobs. So you would have found that most of the female-dominated jobs were those in the social work sectors, service sectors, education, and so on, whereas the men would have dominated in the physical jobs, construction, mining, manufacturing, and for those in balance were like in real estate and public administration. So the distribution was still following that traditional pattern. Men are more skilled and they deserve to be compensated because of the higher risk of this job and so on, but women are just working in administrative, technical, supervisory, clerical roles.
So, Dr. Thorburn, I think part of your research would suggest that if you tell the people how much are earning, then it make it more sense to make daily earn what I'm earning. But how? I mean, so if you tell everybody, all right, everybody earning 10 million at TVJ, why? Because they know that I'm earning 10 million, she must get 10 million.
Okay, let me backtrack just a little bit to say that the problem of the gender wage gap is one that has been recognized for a long time. This is not a new problem, but it has been very sticky. It's been very difficult to fix. So, we have decades of research now that have shown us what doesn't work, for sure, what works a little bit. So if you look across the world at the different efforts that have been made, including in Jamaica, what has been, does affirmative action work? The data tends to show that no, it doesn't really. Does legislation for equal pay work? In some areas it works, in some places it doesn't. We have the legislation, it doesn't seem to have had much effect in Jamaica. Mm-hmm. I don't know if there's ever been a really rigorous study, but certainly from what we do know, it doesn't seem to have worked. That's a whole other conversation why that hasn't worked. What has worked is pay transparency, and how you get pay transparency, you can get to it a different number of ways, but the basic principle is that when people know that what they earn is different from what somebody on their same level is earning, it gives everybody a space in which to negotiate a better salary, whether it's you're going to put me on par with my coworker who is doing the exact same thing as me, or you are going to adjust something because, so pay transparency has been shown to be the most effective way that we can measure that can affect wage equity. And not only with regard to gender, because wage gaps exist according to different to different factors, gender being one of them. But pay transparency, from what the research shows, has been shown to be one of the most effective ways of equalizing wage equity across the board.
Before Keenan comes back in, one of the things that I know is that for government workers, there is a scale that's published. You can go in and know that, okay, your SEG 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I don't know if the research also looked at pay equity in the government sector.
It
and if
did.
There was a difference.
No, it wasn't. So we found that there is, in Jamaica, there is not a wage gap in the public sector. However, one of our recommendations is for the public sector to be the leader in pay transparency, and to do that by making accessible what salaries are according to posts. The question is, but that's already available. We know that. But if you think about it, how do you actually know that? Where would you go to find that information out? So that is information that, yes, it's publicly available, but it's not accessible. And so one of the key recommendations is for the public sector to lead on this. And this, again, would have positive effects, not only with regard to gender wage gaps, but just for people to have greater understanding of what our taxpayers are doing, what people are earning. Anytime anybody's salary comes out, people are like, really? That's what they're earning?
Yeah.
And so it's, in that regard, pay transparency in the public sector actually has benefits beyond just what it might do to address the gender wage gap.
Legally, anything can happen to me. If I'm paying a man $5 million, Keenan, you could take this too. I'm paying a man $5 million, and Delia get the job and I give her $2.5 million, and she know the man was getting $5 million. Legally, can anything happen to me?
Well, we do have the Equal Pay Act, which was enacted in 1975, but the issues with that act is that it's not enforced, and the fines for breaches are meaningless in these days. You get $200, fine. You just go
200 Jamaican dollars.
200 Jamaican dollars. You go to court and pay.
Oh my gosh!
My gosh!
The act. So that's something that needs to be, revised, obviously, in line with today's realities, and to be better enforced going forward.
Before Delia, Dr. Thorburn, the report suggests that women are more likely to be in vulnerable jobs. What is considered for a vulnerable job for a woman?
One where they can lose the job more easily, one that is not, where they're not as protected as they might be. That, to me, is less of a concern than the income gap and the wage gap, particularly in Jamaica's specific labor market, which right now is what we call tight. Keenan can probably explain that a bit better, but we're in a situation now, and the data is only starting to show it, but many people know this, especially employers, that it's hard to attract and retain talent at all levels. And the issue of vulnerability, I think, in our current context is less important than the working conditions, but what are people being paid? Because what employers are finding now is that people are just not willing to do what they would have been willing to do for the job, for the salaries that they're being paid. Some of it is attributed to COVID, that people realized when of COVID that, one second, I can do better for myself than slogging out at this job and taking this home, whether it's by working for my own account or that I have a better quality of life, even if I'm not earning as much. So there are a lot of factors that go into that. But across the board, it shows that women are in more vulnerable positions. But I think for Jamaica, that is less of a concern than some of the other factors that contribute to women having lower incomes and earning less.
We have to go, but I just have one comment to make. I remember there was something that said Jamaica had more women in leadership roles in the workplace. So it is troubling to me that we have more women making decisions, and yet women are not receiving equal pay.
Yeah, but that's a tricky data point, because if you look, Jamaica has the most female managers in the world, and we use that a lot. But if you look at the scales above, we're still only at 20%.
We have to go. Keenan, if you had to take the one thing, the greatest takeaway from this what Capri did, what would it be?
Well, it's that it is timely, it's appropriate, and it makes very practical suggestions because, as mentioned earlier, salaries data is out there for the public sector, but nobody's going to sit down and read the Civil Service Establishment Act or the Public Sector and Public Bodies Act and so on, but to make that more accessible. So the government can take the lead and sends a signal to the private sector and other, self-employed persons that, this is the direction that we're heading in. We are striving for equal pay. The gender gap has long existed, but it's finally time to really eliminate it.
And it should be equal pay right across the board?
Yes. Of course, you're going to have some nuance.
So would it not depend on the kind of job? I mean, like,
Oh, yes, absolutely.
If me and Delia in a construction,
so if you have different skill sets, different, age, experience, qualifications.
Equal work,
so on.
equal
but
pay.
equal work, equal pay is what you're saying.
Yeah.
What's going to happen to the report?
The report is on Capri's website, capricaribbean.org, together with the other 2 reports. This was a kind of a 3-part series looking at what does it mean that we are not properly valuing unpaid care work. So that's kind of the core of it, which I'd love to talk about. I know we don't have the time today, but they're all on our website, free to download, and the actual presentations are on our YouTube channel as well.
All right, brilliant. Thank you both for coming.
Thank you.
Blessings to you both. Director of Research at Capri, Dr. Diana Thorburn, and economist, Keenan Faulkner.
All right. Coming up, the effectiveness of self-help books.
Soon come.
Listen, come.